Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition, and we're broadcasting from beautiful Irvine, California. Happy to have you with us today. And I'd like to start out with a word from our sponsors. Again, if you believe, like a lot of us out there, that the dollar's falling apart because this government has over-leveraged itself, you don't really have a lot of faith in the stock market, and you don't believe in cryptocurrency, who would? Then what should you invest your money in? Gold, of course. Gold's been around for thousands of years. It's always been the original currency, but you don't want to have a bathtub of gold in your backyard. So what can you do? Call Genesis Gold Group and set up a gold-backed IRA. The dollar could collapse. Yeah, it's been tough before, but gold's never gone to zero. Call Genesis Gold Group right now. Learn about rolling over your risky stock-backed IRA into a gold-backed IRA, and they'll even give you $10,000 in silver if you qualify. So call right now, 800-594-9698. That's 800-594-9698. And I'd like to welcome back Tom Amenta to the show. Tom, from the great state of Illinois, blue as it may be, welcome back. Happy to have you with me today.
Hey, it's good to be here. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Hey, listen, like our headline says today, a Russia fiasco, politics mixed, polls, Hunter. Let's peel the onion back a little bit here. Tom, you have been involved in military activities before.
Mm-hmm.
For the full disclosure for our audience, Tom has that background. So, Tom, what did you make of, I don't know what to call it anything other than a fiasco over the weekend. Yevgeny Prigozhin was sitting on cloud nine, and now he's sitting in the outhouse. How did all of this come about? Was it staged? Was it orchestrated? Give us some perspective on your thoughts.
So, first of all, Prigozhin was losing power, and he's been losing it steadily for months. He has feuded with the Kremlin. He's feuded with the defense ministers. He's claimed that, and the senior generals, he's claimed that they weren't supplying him properly. There's been a simmering, increasing tension between the Wagner Group, and the Kremlin for about 3 months now. So,
right.
I don't think anybody saw this coming, right? Like to be this crazy, but he had to do something if he was going to continue to maintain his power and maintain his control the way he wanted to. And the other thing too is, like, in his mind, the only force, on the Russian side that was actually taking territory, that was making gains, that was doing anything, was his. He took Bakhmut. I mean, tens of thousands of people died for it, but he actually had that success. So, I don't think it's I don't understand enough about it, to be honest, to say who's right or who's wrong. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I would like to see Wagner and Russia out of there, like we always been talking about for a while. But that was sort of the stage to it. Now, I don't think that this was staged at all. I think that he, if anything, what was staged is ABC News is reporting that what was staged and what was a hoax was his pretense to start it by claiming that Russian military or Russian missiles killed 30 of his guys. That has been proven false. I think that it was a desperate act by a desperate guy. People have been asking, well, how could he get to, take over the southern headquarters so quickly? Well, it's basically blitzkrieg warfare. You overwhelm with speed. Speed's its own form of security. No one's expecting it coming. And some of the reports that I've read is that for about the first 8 hours of it, Putin was really worried not only that, he might get to Moscow, but his security forces and some of the other government apparatuses might not back him. But once they came out and said, Vladimir, we're still your boys, that is my understanding. So that's when, Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, said, all right, guys, a bloodbath serves nobody. We don't need all of this fighting. We've got to do this, as peacefully as possible. Make Wagner my problem in Belarus, and, we'll go from there. And I think Putin accepted it in part to, I don't want to say save face, but in part to know that, like, that was going to stop it. And then I also think in part because, he doesn't want to lose an ally in Belarus that's on the border of the Ukraine. And, the Belarusian president said it correctly. He's like, listen, no one wins here. And if Russia loses, Belarus gets crushed too. He's like, this was my self-interest. That's why I brokered the deal. And so, so at a broad level, that's really what I think what I think happened.
Don't you think Putin demonstrated his cowardness when, Prigozhin was looked like he was coming to Moscow, and Putin hops out of town, gets on a plane, heads to St. Petersburg, turns off the transponder so they don't really know where he's going. I mean, at the slightest hint that there might be trouble, he flees the capital. What does that tell you about Putin?
Well, I think that, if somehow there was going to be an invasion of Washington, D.C. in the blink of an eye, they're going to get the president out of it and put him on Air Force One and send him to Omaha, Nebraska. I mean,
that's the right.
I think that's just a standard operating procedure thing. Yeah. And I think that's him listening to security forces because, you cut the head off the snake, right? And so I think to me that made sense.
Okay.
That's just a tactical consideration. I mean, I understand how some people are saying that, but
I think you're right. Tactically, you used a good analogy. I mean, I think back on, 9/11, you had the president actually in the air. Okay.
Yep.
So, there is some parallels to that. And I think the security reasons that you talked about, made some sense. I don't know. What did Prigozhin get out of this? I mean, from everything I'm reading now, Tom, the Wagner group they're having to turn in their weapons. They're basically disbanding. I mean, you can say what you want about how thuggish they were, and you alluded to it earlier in the show, rightly or wrongly, they were a fighting force, really stronger than the Russian army. And the interesting thing is, there's still Wagner people all over Africa. So what happens to that group?
So that's a really interesting question. And I think that we're not going to know for a while because, Prigozhin makes his money. Everyone calls it the catering contracts. And I know it's kind of funny, but everyone knows that that's just the slush fund that they were pushing, the money to for the military. I think that, they also have a pretty sizable control of the diamond trade in the Central African Republic. They're strong arming people down there. So I think it'll be interesting to see I don't know what's going to play out in Africa yet. I think that'll be an interesting thing to watch. Right. But as far as, what he had, it was a desperate last gambit. He knew he was getting pushed out. He knew that he wasn't going to have the control that he had anymore. I think he knew that he figured out he overplayed his hand, and it got to the point where, okay, so what can I do? Right. And I just think that it was a desperate act. And once he realized that he was going to get mowed down in Moscow, what else do you do? Right. But on the other side, Putin knew that if he does mow him down, he's losing a ton of valuable fighters, right? I've heard anywhere from 8 to 12,000. I've heard 25,000 is overblown. Maybe that's including Africa and Syria and all that. I don't know. But you're going to risk a fight with your most capable troops that you might roll into the Russian army. So I think that's what ultimately happened with both sides.
Yeah, I heard an analogy I thought was a pretty appropriate thing. You heard the old story about the dog chasing the car, and in this case, the dog actually caught the car. Now what? Yep. Now what are you going to do with it? I mean, he was in a situation where he literally he was probably shocked there was zero resistance on the way up, and now he's got to make a decision. Hell, am I going to go all the way to Moscow and try to take over the Kremlin? And then what if I do?
I think that once the security forces backed Putin, it was over. Yeah, and he knew it. Yeah, and he knew he was going to die.
Yeah. He chose the another alternative. All right, away from Russia for a little bit. Let's get back on some really, I'll call these shocking polls, but nothing in American politics shocks me anymore. Tom, you and I have talked about the Trump effect numerous times, but I got to tell you something now. Morning Consult is a very respected polling outfit. They're out today, Donald Trump leading Joe Biden 44-41, whereas the Harris poll, you and I talked about this thing last time on the show, up 6, Trump is. The NBC, and I'm going to give them some polling credit, their polls are usually pretty good. They had Biden up 4. So between Trump 3, Trump 6, Biden 4, this race is very much in flux. And look, he's up 35, 38 points on the Republican side. Is there anything that's going to stop this juggernaut? Because the way this situation is looking right now, at least on the Republican side, I never thought I'd be saying this. Trump looks more secure in getting the Republican nomination than Biden does getting the Democratic nomination.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of wild, right? I mean, I think Biden has it sewn up just because he's a sitting president. Like that in American political history, unless the sitting president died or is, disgraced, they're going to do it. As far as those polls, I think what's crazy is that, the morning consult polls essentially saying it's pushed. The margin of error is plus or minus three. So
Right.
it is essentially wiped. So now you have one that's outside the margin of error and saying that Biden's just barely ahead, and then you have another one that's outside the margin of error and saying that Trump's just barely ahead.
Right.
But I think that represents honestly a certain level of fatigue in the American voting populace. I mean, neither one of these guys are good options. I mean, it's like trying to decide between a D minus and an F, and I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. I mean, just flip a coin, right? And you can put the one grade on the other. It's still a failing grade. So I think that's part of it. I think that it's also where you get it as fractured as everything is. It's also where did you poll and who did you get to commit to it? Like that's the problem with polling these days is they're
Right.
getting remarkably less accurate. Not through any fault of the pollsters, but just because of the people who are willing to participate, and that's so geographically tied these days that I'm always worried about polls that are this close. Now, I mean, Trump's rushing the Republican field. That is not up for debate. That is not up for discussion. He's absolutely doing that.
Right.
Just because there's a point where the polls are clean. It just makes sense.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. Let me give you a couple crazy numbers here, okay? 64% of people believe these Trump charges are politically motivated. Now, Tom, you don't get to 64 without some cross section of independents and Democrats. They see this. They see this too. And on the Democratic side, in excess of 60% of Democrats do not want Biden to be the nominee. And then as you were just alluding to, the thought that we're going to have Biden-Trump redo, it's like only 20-something% of the country wants that. I mean, the negative numbers on both Biden and Trump, they're off the charts.
Yep.
So it's sort of a head scratcher. I'm difficult to get my arms around it. And I know I'm throwing out a lot of statistics, but none of this stuff's making any sense. I mean, 77% of Republicans, they don't even care about these charges.
Yeah, and they should. And the thing that I'm getting to this point, like politically motivated or not, okay, look, ladies and gentlemen, let's say that you think this tape is somehow a hoax, which I'm sorry for you that you've gone that far down the QAnon rabbit hole. Please come back to the real world. It's not just the tape. That's what I think people don't understand. Okay, the special prosecution has had that audio for months. They have talked to everybody in that room in the grand jury, some of them multiple times it's come out. Okay, like they weren't gonna they weren't gonna, for lack of a better term, go to war with Donald J. Trump unless they had a kill shot, or they really thought they had a kill shot on this. Okay, I don't think it's a question, honestly, anymore with Trump about did he or didn't he. He literally admitted that he did. Okay, he wasn't joking. He wasn't throwing around some magazine articles like he told Brett Baier on Fox. He did it. Come on. And the other thing is like, use a little bit of logic. This fits his pattern. He has a narcissistic streak. He has the need to feel like he's right. He wanted to prove a point. And the point that he's making is that Milley was a problem for Iran, not him. This all fits. This is his MO. Like, but the next part of it is that everyone who's like on the side of like, oh, he's definitely going to get convicted. He's going to go into a jury in Florida.
Oh, I'm well aware of
Miami.
Well,
right?
no, and actually the jury pool right now is slated to be in a town called Fort Pierce, which is north of Palm Beach. Fort Pierce, that's in Indian River County. I will say this. All Trump needs is one juror.
Exactly.
To say no. To me, given the and how are you going to get an impartial jury?
You can't. You can't.
That's my. I don't. Prosecutors normally bring cases they expect to win. Right. I don't know. Notwithstanding, I heard the tape too. I heard it. So, to me, it's perplexing.
I mean, to me, it's one of those things that I think that the evidence is going to be overwhelming. But I think that what we're about ready to find in American politics is just how deeply divided, just how fractured this nation is because I don't think this is about what he did. He did it. He admitted he did it on that tape. Those are his words. They're his words. And I think it's going to come out very quickly that his aides can like, yeah, it was marked secret. And, and everyone's going to like, yep, it all was. That's not the question here. Like this whole Presidential Records Act that he's pivoted to is like, oh, it's not an Espionage Act, it's Presidential Records Act. If you've gone so far as to say, yeah, I shouldn't have had the document, but you can't prosecute me under this thing. You just have to slap my wrist with the other one. Like, you kind of know you have it too, if that's your public thing. But I don't think it's going to be about that. I think it's going to be about will you find the people that do it, and will they actually listen to the evidence, or are they going to bring so much of their overwhelming preconceived bias on both points, frankly, that this becomes I think on some levels this is going to become sort of a trial and a referendum on America, and a referendum on do we believe sort of in the ideals that we have. And then the other thing too about it is that, like, going back to the election that you just had, look, if Trump wins the general election, this dies. Which is concerning and problematic to me, quite frankly.
Let me touch base on that. The trial's already moved to December. Okay. Mm-hmm. The prosecution asked that it be moved to December. Okay.
Yeah.
The likelihood is, as you and I have talked, it's going to be further delayed. Mm-hmm. Tom, I cannot conceive, frankly, how if it's delayed further into 2024, and if Trump maintains this lead, I mean, by Super Tuesday, the nomination is going to be over. By Super Tuesday. Yeah. If, big if, yeah. Folks, that is an eternity in politics. But we have to recognize, as we talked about, it's not like Trump's up by 5 or 10 or 15. He's up 30 or 40. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's astronomical. The only one even competitive with him is Governor DeSantis. So if this thing is pushed out past March of 24, I cannot conceive of a trial happening prior to the election. And I think ultimately, in Trump's world, the referendum, if he is elected, that's his jury. I think he believes that. And it will not surprise me at all if that happens.
So he definitely, I agree with you. I think he definitely sees that. But that's not what it should be about. Like, look, you and I had the conversation when the documents were first found. And I'm like, as someone who's handled classified material before, if I had all of that and they found it, I am leaving that space in handcuffs. It is guilty until proven innocent for just about any other American, on something like this with the willful stonewalling and everything like that. Nah, man, you are going out in steel bracelets. Right. We talked about, New York with him, and I think that he's probably almost certainly guilty of 34 misdemeanors, but the fact that you're going to try and use a federal law to like amp up a state law, like it's one of those things, like I'm sure he did it, but the prosecution's flawed. It's an interesting legal strategy. He's probably going to skate on that one. Okay. Right. This isn't that. This is what's like kind of bothers me about America just in general right now, and how we're framing this is when you take a step back. Okay. And maybe this part of this is just me, how just passionately centrist I am. If they show he definitely knew he didn't declassify this, it's just actually, this is a great way. It's like when we talked about Fetterman, when he had the stroke, and I'm like, look, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I don't care who you like. This person is not medically fit to run. Okay. And we all know how I liked Dr. Oz, right? Like, I mean, I couldn't take a chance. I never missed a beat taking that guy behind the woodshed, but at the end of the day, I believe that like he should be in the Senate seat because Fetterman wasn't fit to run, and you've seen some of those problems and everything like that. Donald Trump did not handle those documents correctly. It's not a political thing to me anymore. It's not about the politics. It's about, you mean to tell me we're going to go with round 2, giving him the most sensitive information the United States has, and he's already demonstrated that he can't handle it. That's my problem. I would say the same thing. And you know me, I'm a pretty straight broker. I'd say the same thing about Biden. I'd say the same thing about Harris. I'd say the same thing about anybody if you have this fact pattern.
Oh, your principles are pretty sound, Tom. I mean, that's...
But what concerns me, so many people are like, hey, we don't care. You need to care. The thing about America is we ultimately believe in holding people accountable. Accountability is critical to our society. Hold him account. And look, I know I don't disagree that there's some level of political motivation. Of course there is, like, especially in this modern climate. But when you strip all that away, it's about accountability, and he needs to be held accountable. And the other thing is like, I can't for the life of me imagine that guy back in the White House in control of the very things that he's shown he can't be an adult with.
Well, let me give you the counterpoint argument here. About half right now, a very large chunk of the country feels Joe Biden does not have the cognitive abilities. I mean, you can question Trump, but no one questions whether he cognitively is there or not. He is. Yeah, but Biden's not. And at this point, Tom, I know it's a long shot, but if these poll numbers continue throughout 2023, before these primaries happen, and if Biden's cognitive abilities you're not going to get better, okay? You don't get better as you age. That doesn't happen. I think there's a real an outside shot, maybe 1 in 4, maybe, that Biden is not on the ticket. I think personally, if that happened, that's bad news for Trump. And on the Democratic side, the perverse argument is, if it's anyone other than Trump, the Democrats are in trouble. But I don't know. That could be conventional wisdom. It might be wrong. If some of these polls on Trump are right, it's reminiscent of 2016, where no one believed the polls, and lo and behold, there you have it. So that's what I'm saying. There are such conflicting cross currents in these numbers that it's confusing at best because of the flaws of both major party candidates.
First of all, Biden has cognitive ability. Reagan had Alzheimer's his second term, like so debilitating that George H.W. Bush really had 2 presidential terms. Just one of them is called president, one Mr. President, one of them is Mr. Vice President. Right?
The last year of Reagan's, I agree with the last year.
You see, and then you see what they do with Fetterman. Like, the political machine is not going to disqualify their person over something like that,
right?
Which is tragic. Again, we all know where I just said it. Like, that never should happen, right? Frankly, if Biden's cognitive declines much more, he should be disqualified from running. Just like I think Trump should be disqualified for running based on this document thing, based on hearing what he said. It's not about their ideology, even for me. It's about the minimum competency required to do the job. And I think both of them fail that standard. But here we are. And so, like I said, you got an F and a D minus, like whatever side. And like, for me, I think they're both Fs. Okay. Like, for me, I'm sitting here in the middle, like clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am stuck in the middle with you. Right. Like, it's absurd to me.
We talked about it briefly, but if we forecast 6 months ahead, and these poll numbers are where they are, No Labels is going to maybe come to your rescue. I firmly believe that's going to happen. If we come down and it's Trump Biden, I really believe No Labels is going to put up a candidate.
I hope so. Yeah. You know what? It's one of those things, like, just to see. Careful what you wish for, you may get it. But I'm struggling to see a worse duel of 2 candidates. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I don't, everyone here on this shows knows me. Like, I got problems with both sides, and I'm pretty, I don't miss a chance to mention it. But but then you look like, DeSantis seems like he's about to crater himself if he doesn't start listening to someone besides his wife when it comes to how to talk tough and how to do things on the campaign trail. Like you said, so many misfires and so many missteps.
He had a good day yesterday. The largest police union in Florida endorsed him.
Yeah, he did.
And he came out with a solid proposal on border protection, getting rid of amnesty. Listen, with no votes tallied yet, he's clearly the number 2, and by a wide margin. Okay.
Yes.
Ramaswamy, he's picked up a little bit of juice. Pence has picked up a little bit of juice. No one else has. So, all right, but let me shift over to the Biden side of the equation. We've talked about Trump's pop problems and the document case. This Burisma thing and Hunter and Joe. I mean, come on. Do they think every American is stupid? Comer's committee has connected the dots, and to hear Hunter on tape. My dad is sitting here in the room, and then President Biden denies it. I mean, Tom,
Yeah.
as an independent, straight down the middle guy, I mean, I know two wrongs aren't making a right, but this just smells bad, looks bad, and is bad.
I laughed my ass off, Mark, when I started reading everything, and I started reading like the felony guilty pleas and all that other stuff. And like at one point you have a $1.4 million tax bill that you owe the IRS. You find a way to pay it, which when you really look at Hunter Biden and how he makes his money and stuff like that, like I can see it, forget the daddy thing for a minute. We'll get there. But just like in terms, like I can see that. And then the whole weapon charge, because like his ex got mad at him when he was high and threw it in the garbage, which
so
feels like the biggest nothing burger of a charge. But because it's a felony, and you're reading this and you're like, wait a minute, because this is the other thing that I always point out to people when it comes to all this. Biden was the vice president for 8 years, and now he is the president. He has been so wired in, and then he was the senator in Connecticut for almost 30 years.
No, and he was a senator from Delaware since he's
Delaware,
29 years old. So
yeah.
he's been in the senator higher since he's been 29.
So he's at the absolute peak of American politics his entire life. And you mean to tell me that guy, when his kid gets in trouble, suddenly he didn't have any influence? It is
laughable,
right? It's the same thing that I've said. Like if I'm gonna go after Trump, and I will go after Biden on this one, like all day. How much time do you got? Like, please don't tell me that this was fair and impartial, even if it's just the psychological bias of knowing that you risk pissing the president of the United States off. Right. I mean, think about that. Like you're the IRS agent, and you're like, well,
my career, I
could do all these things to Hunter Biden, or maybe I hope I don't get fired, or I hope and then, for Merrick Garland's position to try and say that the Justice Department was fair and impartial.
Oh God, forget it.
Come on. Like it's just impossible to happen.
Well, it's the combination of the government and the media covering this stuff up. I mean, think about it. This goes back greater than 4 years. I mean, this would have, had this story broke during the 2020 election, Donald Trump would still be president right now, likely.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
Likely. I mean, we can't rewrite history, so maybe. But what I think is so interesting about it is actually says like the hilarious thing to me is that the biggest red herring here was that laptop. That laptop didn't really mean anything. Everything else, it was all there. Justice had all of it. Like, they were dealing with all of those things, but it just kills me where everyone made this big deal about that stupid laptop, and it turns out that it was irrelevant. Yeah.
There wasn't really anything there, but at the same time, everything else is already with the government. But it's okay, Hunter. Daddy didn't do anything. This is fair and impartial, and you're just going to get a slap on the wrist. Come on, man.
But again, the big issue here was the influence peddling and the money transfers, and was Biden involved with it? And I think what's going to happen is the media with big tech is going to cover it up. I mean, we're already starting to see, Tom, and you're in tech, so you see what's going on. Already the whitewashing of stories that are negative on Biden. Anything negative on Biden is the stories are getting crushed. Mm-hmm. But what I have noticed is certain media organizations are now starting to take the gloves off and ask the tough questions. Mm-hmm. And even a liberal like Al Hunt is saying, wait a minute, Governor Newsom, Governor Whitmer, and the Governor Cooper in North Carolina, hey, where are you guys? This ship is taking on some water. And when a guy like Al Hunt and then the mainstream media start asking the questions, the question I have for you, Tom, has someone made the decision that Biden's got to go, or is he still Teflon Joe where no candidates are going to step forward because it would upset the party? Which of those doors do you open?
It's a really interesting question, and I just sort of default to the American political precedent of you don't go after a standing president. Yeah. that's where it is. I mean, the one thing I do want to say, sort of the final major comment on Hunter Biden, is the one thing that does bother me about this from the right is that you all actually can look me in the eye with a straight face and tell me that Donald J. Trump didn't hook his kids up. Like, look, Hunter Biden's got a substance abuse problem for a while, and Junior never looks exactly sober, in my opinion. Like, that's just me. Like, crucify me if you want to, but it's like I always look at these parallels between the Trump children and the Biden kids, and I don't think it's right. I want to be very clear about that. But you mean to tell me that dad's influence didn't get deals done for both sides of that? Like, just
Of course they did.
and again, look, right, and again, that's fine. But when you can prove that one of the kids broke the law, they, like I expect Trump to be, like I expect Biden to be in this situation, need to be held accountable, and that's the problem. It's not, it's not did you, it's that there's no accountability in any of this. And that's what I think is so interesting. And this is part of the reason I actually think that the Democrats are going to take a page out of the Republican playbook and just try and gloss it over, just try and whitewash it and keep the sitting president. Again, it goes back to that F versus D- thing I said.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, for all the clamoring, again, bear in mind, these are Democrats saying this. So, but it's still only a handful, Tom. But the only thing I think would be different is if this story on the money piece with the Bidens turns into reality, then he won't be able to run. But again, we're not anywhere near that at this point.
No.
And on the final comment for me on this Hunter thing, most people don't give a damn about Hunter Biden. They're looking at the economy, they're looking at education, their safety. I mean, there's a lot of things on people's mind. I don't believe that's a winning issue for my side of the table than the Republican side. If we're going to base this campaign on Hunter Biden, it's not going to happen. And I don't think if Trump's a nominee, he's not going to do that. This thing will be pushed aside one way or another. The investigations with Representative Comer's committee will continue, but I cannot see this thing literally unless something comes out pretty soon, Tom. This story's going in the history books.
I mean, I would, the theme for me this whole show has been accountability, right? And I wish I would have liked to have seen Hunter Biden held truly accountable. And if there is sort of a smoking gun that they can find on his father, the way that this tape is sort of smoking gun to Trump, then I hope it comes out, and I hope that he's also staring down the barrel of federal prosecution. Like, look, I know that sometimes I come off pretty harsh on, to certain people, but it's like, no, like, accountability matters. That's the problem that's going on with both of these. And it's like, that Joe Biden's lying about Hunter Biden, and that Donald J. Trump went into that Brett Baier argument and lied about, what he had. And that's the thing it's like, listen, politicians lie to a point. I get that. But like, that's what's bothering me about it so bad. It's like, we are now lying about real criminal things and expecting the American population either to be too stupid to understand what's going on, or because they're so partisan that they're going to back their hack no matter what. Both of these candidates suck. Like, I don't know the other way to put it. Like, this isn't
You're using the Liz Cheney analogy.
Well, that's the great thing. I love, like, that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to follow up with. It's like Liz Cheney had the greatest quote yesterday, which is like, what's wrong with the American political system? And look, that is such a dyed-in-the-wool, deep red Republican politician. Like, I'm sorry if you don't understand the Cheney legacy on that is a Republican's Republican, right? And she's like, yeah, we're electing idiots.
Yeah, she did say that.
And it's like, I'm like, thank you, Liz. You're right.
All right, well, we got about a minute left. Let's close it out because, folks, the good news is Tom's going to, while I'm away for a few weeks over in Asia, Tom's going to be hosting some shows. So, Tom, thank you for that. But let's close it out with this. Where do you see things happening now? I mean, give me your projections. What's going to happen really in the next 30 days or so? What's happening?
I would say that in the Russian-Ukrainian thing, we are going to know really quickly how it's affecting Russian troop morale. And if it does seriously start affecting Russian troop morale, I think you could see massive gains. I think you could see them giving up in droves. And if they do, then Putin is in a really bad position. So it's like, how do we get a Lukashenko style saving face here so he doesn't get super desperate? If they keep fighting, if they keep grinding, I still think that ultimately the Ukrainians are going to be successful, but I think that it's going to be this insane slog. For Trump, I think that the biggest thing that's going to come out is, will Aline Cannon, the judge, who's already demonstrated pretty conclusively that she was going to be super team Trump the first time, will she play it down the middle? She's not recusing herself. That's very clear. Like, is she going to play it down the middle, or is she going to try and put her thumb on the scale to help out the president because he is just that deep in it? She is a Trump appointee. And then I think with Hunter Biden, I don't think this is the last story, to be honest. I think that there's more information out there, and I think that it needs to be gathered. And I will be interested to see what happens with all of that. But, that's for the next 30 days. But yeah, I think that for Trump, it's a race. Wow. Now. It's a race to get him in the courtroom.
Well, and I think that race is going to be delayed, and I don't see that happening until later in 2024. Tom, anyhow, great comments today. And the interesting thing is, when you're hosting, you're going to be able to expand on these comments coming up here in a couple of weeks. So again,
absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks again for joining me today, Tom. Much appreciated. Folks, that's it for today. We're going to be back on Thursday, but thank you, Tom, your comments. Great having the background that you had to talk about these issues. Folks, we'll see you on Thursday. A lot of stuff. We'll cut through the propaganda as we always do. Thanks for viewing. Thanks for listening. See you in a couple days.